First, almost 600 jobs have gone in Leicester this week. The Mark Group, which specialises in solar energy and home insulation, has gone into administration. More than 900 jobs have gone in total around the country. 570 of them are from its Leicester headquarters. 150 people have been kept on while administrators look for a new buyer. Well, joining us to discuss the implications of all of this is Dave Sowden, who's the Chief Executive of the Sustainable Energy Association. Thanks for coming in, Dave. So your industry laying the blame very fairly and squarely at the door of the government. But if your industry relies so heavily on subsidies, is it worth preserving?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to look at the overall energy policy framework, which investors in renewable energy and in energy efficiency depend on a stable policy framework. Now, the solar industry put plans to the government in the summer that indicated how it could come off subsidy across a 3 to 5 year timescale and then become competitive against fossil fuels. But the proposals that the government has put forward cut the subsidies to solar down to 15% of their current level and the tariffs that are paid to consumers by 87%. So the trajectory to take the industry off subsidy is absolutely brutal, and clearly the investors in Mark Group have felt that it's no longer viable.
And what is the implication for other renewable energy companies, not just this one?
Well, I think across the whole sector for energy and buildings, there is now a crisis of investor confidence in this country. This is the second time the Mark Group has suffered, in fact, because around this time last year, they laid off jobs as a result of short-term changes to energy efficiency policy. So they've really had a double hit.
Dave Sowden saying that this has been caused by the cuts in subsidies that your government has made, and it now causing a problem which has led to 600 jobs going at this one firm in Leicester.
Yeah, and of course no one wants to hear about job losses in any industry, frankly, but the government has a responsibility. You know, my constituents want two things. Number one, they want to make sure they've got a electricity supply that is there and is constant, but of course they want to be able to afford that electricity supply. So the government's got a responsibility to make sure that as we invest in future technology, that's affordable, and that you know, don't forget we're paying for it. Now, the good news is that those installations, cost of those installations is coming down, and so the government is tapering off the subsidy that's going to those industries at the same time as the cost of the installation is coming down.
Is there any good news in what Mark's just said?
I would agree with the need to get the industry off subsidy. I would entirely agree with the need to watch out for consumer bills. But the short-sighted nature of these cuts are that we miss an opportunity to finish the job with solar, to get it into a competitive arena where it can compete with fossil fuels, which in the long run will lower the cost of energy supply. If we cut it off at the knees at this stage, we won't finish the job, and in fact all the subsidy that's gone in so far will be wasted.
I mean, let's make the point, you know, 3 years ago we heard all this from the solar industry where we were told it was all going to collapse and because we're cutting the subsidies too fast, and actually the rate of installations went up, and lots of people still been having solar panels over the last 2 years, you know, so you've got to get that balance right. You know, we've got to cut the subsidies down and taper them off as the cost of installations comes down, because we've got to look after consumers.
He's got a point, hasn't he, Anne?
No, I think what's characterised the government's policy in recent years has been stop-start. You know, there was a big push for wind power, then solar, now, heaven help us, we're talking about fracking. We haven't got a long-term energy policy, and more than anything, that's what the country needs. You know, we're facing the prospect of 3-day weeks again if we don't get this right. And in the long term, it's got to be renewable energy, because nothing else will be there in the future.
How on earth are you going to hit those targets that you claimed you wanted to hit for reducing greenhouse gases?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's just look at the facts. You know, the reason we're in this pinch point, because we're under so much pressure, is because the previous Labour government made no decisions on energy. We haven't had a single nuclear power station built under the 13 years or planned under Labour, and we're having to tackle this problem and pick it up as we came in 5 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how are you going to hit these targets
so we're now tackling.
It's not possible, is it?
So
with
we
these
are
cuts?
delivering new nuclear, which gives a great help to base load. We're also obviously using gas to try and meet the shortfall. At the same time, trying to get renewable energies up and running, but make sure we get that balance right between you know, consumers' bills, who are subsidising this, and you know, traditional energy supplies.
And if I may, that's the problem. The balance is not right. I entirely endorse the principles behind this, which is that we need to get bills down. But the fact remains that it is the energy measures that you invest in buildings, principally energy efficiency, solar coming down in price, and it is the energy efficiency and the other measures that we put into buildings, low carbon and renewable heating, that have a total policy vacuum at the moment.
Okay, well,
and yet with George Osborne wanting to deliver his long-term economic plan, he needs a low-cost energy industry. All his figures suggest that the measures you put in buildings are the lowest cost, and yet the policy instruments that we have in place are not there to drive that sort of activity.
Well, the Department of Energy and Climate Change says it's regrettable, these job losses are regrettable, but it has supported renewable industries quite heavily, and that's why you've been so successful.
So finish the job.
Right.
I think the legitimate point is actually we've spent this whole discussion talking about generation, and we should be talking about insulation and about preservation and reducing energy consumption as well at the same time. You know, and government's clearly quite keen to see that happen. Technology is going to help as we move forward as well. You know, if the internet can manage.
Lots of businesses in this area that rely on this industry.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you know, domestic homes are consuming quite a lot of energy, and smart technologies can help with that by turning your fridge off at 3 o'clock in the morning automatically because.
We're also talking about people's jobs here, Mark, aren't we? We're talking about 600 jobs going in Leicester.
But they've got to be sustainable. You know, they have to be sustainable in the long term, and government can't keep pouring subsidies in willy-nilly. It has to think about it really carefully, what we are subsidising and the amount of subsidy that's going into those separate industries.
Okay, well,
I completely endorse that. Energy efficiency first, fabric first, but that is where we have the biggest policy vacuum.
Dave,
and that needs addressing urgently.
Dave Southern, thanks very much indeed for coming into the